Hey guys, how's it going? Welcome back to J Raids. Welcome to another Raid Child Legends video, and welcome back to me from the dead, as I wanted to make a video and talk about some of the recent discussion that has been going on in terms of mercurial gear overall. And this is kind of a follow-up to some of the videos you might have seen from Ash or Big Papa Drock that have some conversations from them with the player and people, the developers, in talks around mercurial. And I personally feel pretty qualified to speak on this topic because I am very heavily involved in the arena. As you guys might have seen, if you guys did see the post that I made on my YouTube channel, I did end rank 51 of this last live arena season. I played over 500 games overall. Throughout all of the live arena, I have 6,613 games. So that, nonetheless, I have played throughout all metas within live arena, and of course I have played a lot more recently ever since mercurial has entered the game. Now, I want to add a little bit of a truth behind mercurial that I think often gets or not necessarily avoided in terms of when there are conversations around how annoying mercurial is, how people don't want to see it in the same state that it is. And I want to try to shed some light on a different perspective because I have played a lot of arena well before mercurial was introduced into the game and a lot well after mercurial. And I think there are a lot of benefits that mercurial have done to the arena meta that have made it, honestly, in my opinion, a lot better than it was before. And I think the first place to kind of start this discussion is to talk about what the meta was like before mercurial. And this is where we'll go on a little bit of a history lesson. Now, of course, before mercurial, now you were talking about stone skin being the major way of protecting your champions, whether that is a 4-piece of stone skin on your nukers, a 6-piece stone skin even on champions like Ankara or like Lady Noelle, right, to have a lot of extra tankiness. And then, of course, we had some feral gear as well that kind of added a little bit of extra nuance. And, of course, we had things like pinpoint as well, right? We have a lot of different other sets there, supersonic, so on and so forth. But from the gear, it's less about the gear perspective, but really about more so how the meta was shaped before mercurial. And it was really just a speed meta. It was very much leaning towards whoever went first in the arena had a pretty clear advantage. And behind that were, of course, some of the strongest speed boosters in the game, such as Shuzen. We had Arbeus as 2 of the best speed boosters in the game. But less so about the speed boosters, more so about kind of what followed up with them, right? A lot of you might not know or don't remember, but there were a lot of very powerful, dominant mythicals that often had very easy ways of getting past stone skin. Of course, you had champions like Commodus that was able to place bombs, very powerful, and instantly detonating them, instantly wiping out your team. Of course, we had champions such as, if I can just remember what tribes they belong to. Of course, we had champions like Gizmek, who could activate his burns and strip all of your stone skin. We had champions like Sulfurion, who could not only turn meter boost, but also, again, strip away your stone skin. The list kind of goes on. We have, more champions like Ashnar, for example, right? Another champion that is an orc that was able to HP burn, activate it, again, strip your stone skin while giving a turn meter boost. There are a lot of very powerful turn meter boosters that led into some very powerful ways to just completely obliterate your team. And oftentimes the arena fight came down to whoever went first with their speed booster, and if their speed team was speed tuned, where they just all took a turn before you and the fight was over before you even got a turn. And of course, when you would try to shoehorn into the same game, there were another whole list of very, very uninteractable champions. Of course, I think the one of the biggest boogeymen out there was Nell, right? You would try to play a speed fight, you have your speed boosters, you have your buffers, and then you are faced with a Nell who is able to place poisons through block debuffs and just completely obliterate your team. The list goes on and on. Of course, we have champions like Volcanos, another very classic example of counter speed options, and then the classic ones such as Calvalax and Hegemon. That's to say that the meta was very, very solitary. Like, it was snap, snap, focus down, quick fights, and it was really just coming down to who had the faster speed booster and then could follow into some very dominant nukers. And what was, I think, very tough about that meta in terms of having a speed meta is it is very shoehorned into a very much so a pay to win style, because how do you get faster champions? Well, one, of course, is you have to be able to farm dragon lair tens of thousands of energies in order to try to get even the slightest bit of advantage in speed. And then the second part to it is, of course, the mythical relics, right? Any sort of mythical relic that gives you main stat speed, you know, the hollowed hilt, for example. And I'm not exactly sure timing wise what other speed relics there were before Mercurial, but of course, you know, if you had hollowed hilt versus someone who didn't have hollowed hilt, then that's a very huge advantage in terms of speed. And then of course you have 6-star blessings, you have empowerments, you have faction guardians that all are very pay to win ways of providing extra speed. And so often or not, if your opponents had spent more time, more money, more resources in acquiring faster speed, it was often very hard to compete in the arena. And then the second part is a lot of the very dominant powerhouses in the arena were also mythical champions, right? Of course, champions like Arbaeus, and then Gizmax, Commoduses, Nells, so on and so forth. The last bit outside of all of that was one of the maybe better ways, definitely not a very consistent way of countering this sort of meta, was polymorph. Now, I don't even know if I have any more champions in polymorph, but some that I've just been too lazy to swap out. But one of the biggest ways of having any sort of counter ability to any team that went first before you placed out a bunch of debuffs such as bombs was polymorph. And of course, it's not a very reliable or consistent way to do so. You know, even at 6 stars, it's only a 20% chance of happening. But having that trigger might instantly swing things around into your favor. Imagine at the start of a round, your Gizmac places an HP burn, but then gets instantly sheeped. All of a sudden, maybe he doesn't land the rest of the HP burns. Maybe he just doesn't even get a turn at all because he becomes so slow in the sheep. And then when we had Wand of... What even is Wand called? Wand of Submission. Now the sheeps could be bounced back. And now there is this extra level of RNG to the game that could just be decided in an instant. And this is the meta that existed before Mercurial. It was very heavily leaning towards speed, very heavily leaning towards very powerful mythicals that had ways of dealing with things like stone skin much easier than legendaries. And there was a very heavy RNG element of whether or not you would get the polymorph proc and whether or not that polymorph would get thrown back with the Wand of Submission. Now, what has Mercurial done that has really shaped this meta? And it has done that in a few ways. The first one being that Mercurial just provides the total guard stacks, which I'm sure I don't have to explain to you guys what these do, but these were a very big way of granting extra survivability in ways that Stone Skin couldn't. And this means that you now have ways of dealing with those Commoduses, dealing with those Gizmacs without needing to have a team that went first. So now, a lot of the very strong mythical champions definitely got a big hit. Like, you don't see that many Commoduses around as often, and you don't see that many Nels around as often because of the prevalence of Mercurial. A lot of these very OP uninteractive champions kind of got hit with the sledgehammer because Mercurial was there to kind of block things out. And what that did mean is that because of how much protectiveness that Mercurial gives, it empowered a lot of legendary champions. Now, one of the big things that separates mythical champions from legendary champions is a level of survivability. A lot of mythical champions do have some sort of passive or some effect, some abilities that give them insane amounts of survivability. I think Star Sage Galathir is a very clean example where not only does he have a passive that just straight out it reduces all damage done to him by 25%, he also has an additional passive effect that keeps him alive when he takes fatal damage and then equalizes health, right? And then you'll find this to be very consistent across a lot of different champions. For example, you have Lazarius, who again just takes less damage, up to 30%. You have Theodosia, who is an undead horde, and she has this really good effect that equalizes the health of all allies. You have, for example, even just like Geralt. Well, I think Geralt got buffed before Mercurial, after Mercurial, hard to say. But for example, right, just Geralt has this ability, or has this effect that heals all allies, or heals this champion for damage dealt. I think this very similar passive effect for Gallius, for example. Commodus grants a shield when he survives a certain amount of damage, so on and so forth, right? But one of the big things that separates mythical champions from legendary champions is they oftentimes have built-in survivability that legendary champions do not have. And Mercurial has allowed legendary champions to adopt a very, very high level of survivability that would otherwise not be offered to them. And I think that is very important in being able to drive up the overall utility of legendary champions in the meta. Again, beforehand, meta was very dominated by having fast speed boosters and very OP mythical champions that would be able to blow through stone skin, either through bombs, burns, damage, whatnot. And this would constrict the meta into very small strategies. Now with Mercurial, everyone across the board is a lot tankier. These super uninteractive bomb burn strategies are less prevalent. And now this opens up the floor for a much wider range of options. And for anyone who has actually interacted in the arena over the past couple months, I think everyone would agree that legendary champions have had a really big resurgence across the board. It's no longer being dominated by four or five mythicals in a live arena draft. You are seeing a lot more legendaries. For example, even across my roster, I have Mavara, Donatello, Sanguine Maria. These are champions that probably, in my honest opinion, you wouldn't see nearly as much if Mercurial didn't exist. I think some exception with Donatello. But for example, we have champions like Hilvi. Even let's see if I just open up my live arena draft. We have Pauldrig. We have these are a bit cheating. Well, these guys are. We have like Hilvi, right? Bayek. I guess these aren't great examples, but overall, legendary champions have had more prevalence and power in the arena, and I think a lot of their viability is propped up by Mercurial. Now, the second thing that Mercurial has done that is very, very welcome is sort of reset the playing field in terms of gear, right? When it comes to speed, you have to really accumulate speed gear throughout the years of playing, right? Some people have spent way more energy on farming dragon than anyone else in order to try to get the fastest gear. And I think I saw Cruisin showcase a 500 speed Hilvi, right? It is going to be very difficult to challenge that level of gear if you aren't able to match the amount of resources that are being poured in. Mercurial, on the other hand, was a brand new reset across the board. As long as you and everyone else started farming mercurial gear at the same time, everybody had access to the same amount of mercurial gear. Of course, there's some RNG in terms of the rollings. Like, for example, you know, this helm got a double roll, maybe someone else got a quad roll or a triple roll, right? And their gear is going to be a little bit better than you. But overall, the variance and power level of mercurial gear across the board, assuming you completed all of Grim Forest Hard every rotation, is going to be fairly similar. And I think this has helped to really close the gap in terms of gear level because of how powerful prevalent Mercurial is. Most people want their best champions in this set, and that means everyone has the same sets of gear to play with, obviously with a little bit of variance. Now, where I think this becomes a little bit more interesting is as the arena meta is progressing, there have been more ways of dealing with Mercurial that we have been discovering. And that's also to say that Mercurial might not be the best in every situation. I think a good example is Galathir. I think for me, I used to have Galathir in a 9-piece Mercurial set. You can kind of see it if I set my preset here. Yeah. So I had this Mercurial set, right? This was something that I used beforehand, and you know, it's fairly sort of middle of the pack all across the board, right? 387 speed, nothing too crazy. 604 resistance, you're not resisting anything, right? And while it gave Galathir a lot of additional survivability on top of the survivability he already had, there were still weaknesses to this build, namely Stormcaller from Marius. And it was such a shame to me that I was constantly getting stopped by Marius with Stormcaller, and my Galathir would just get constantly stunned and not be able to do anything. And I think a similar case for a champion like Theodosia, for example, right? Very strong support champions, but can get completely locked out by a Stormcaller, for example. And so I have reconfigured his build. I've dropped the speed, but I've really jumped up the resistance up to 828 resistance. And he has a feral set, so he has that block debuffs, so he can't get stunned by the Marius. And this is important because he brings a cleanse to the team, and then he can cleanse the stuns off of your rest of your team that get hit by the Stormcaller. And so I think there are still explorations and refinements of the meta where it's not super obvious that Mercurial is the best set across the board. And I think it is very strong and very powerful for a lot of champions, especially nukers, right? Someone like Carnage, someone like Maris, you have been seeing these champions shoehorned into Mercurial, which makes them very annoying to deal with and increases their overall survivability, right? But for example, someone like Solnar, who I have built at 220 speed, you just can't have the speed exist with Mercurial, right? Mercurial demands a certain level of speed in order to get things cycling through, and it doesn't fit the style that I try to go with for Solinar. So that's to say that there are still options and probably champions now and in the future that might not make sense in a 9-piece Mercurial set. Or even someone like Rhodos, right? I just don't think Rhodos is even good in a 9-piece Mercurial set. Right now I have a 9-piece Merciless set, right? And of course you can't have both sets on at the same time. And so I think that even though Mercurial has shown to be a very powerful set, there is still room for further exploration and refinement that make Mercurial not the best set for every champion in every situation. And of course, the cherry on the top that I kind of preluded to as a little bit of a foreshadowing is the level of RNG has considerably dropped in Arena. And one of the big things to point out is you just don't see polymorph anymore across the arena. Beforehand, maybe every champion, 6-star champion, would have polymorph, and now let's just do a refresh. I'm not very high up, so it's a little bit hard to say, but no polymorph, no polymorph, no polymorph, no polymorph, no one polymorph here, no polymorph, no polymorph, no polymorph, no polymorph. Whereas polymorph might have been one of the most common blessings across the board. Any 6-star could use it, doesn't matter. The more you had, the more effective it would be. Now it's mostly gone. Now you can't get polymorphed really through total guard. You can't have debuffs bounce back to you through Wand of Submission through total guard. And this has considerably made RNG less prevalent in the arena. Yes, fights have become longer. I think that is one of the biggest complaints about Mercurial and dragging things out. To me, I think in my experience, throughout all the matches that I played, I think that sort of extension time is only about like 33% more. So if a fight you take 3 minutes, now it might take 4 minutes, which again is no small number per se, but it's not double. It's not some number that's blown completely out of proportion. And what I think is one of the big factors to why fights take longer is, again, because fights aren't over and decided by whoever has the first turn. Even if you go first, you nuke down your opponent's board. If they have Mercurial, maybe they don't even die from the nukes. And so now Arena is much more of a back and forth fight, whereas before it might have just been speed boost, nuke, 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 game's over, right? And so this longer fight is, I think, just a natural extension of more interactability, more decision-making autonomy and player agency, and being able to have an actual back and forth fight where their champions can now interact with each other based on their skills, their passives, their whatnots. And I think overall Arena is just in a much better spot now that Mercurial is here. There's a much wider range of champions that you can use, especially at the legendary floor level. Gear across the board, I think, is much more equalized. And this has allowed, in my personal opinion, more people to get into Arena. Now, where I think, and this is a little bit more of a hypothesis, where this sort of quote unquote complaining is coming from, is I think a lot of people have, started farming Mercurial gear and have viewed it as a sort of entry point into the arena, and then are frustrated because it takes longer. They don't have maybe the right champions to really effectively deal with it, and that has kind of reflected upon negatively towards it, making Arena feel worse. But I think at the same time, the people who might complain about it are probably ones who might benefit the most from Mercurial being in the game. And again, this comes down to enabling more legendary champions across the board to be viable and playable within the arena, making gear much more equivalent across the board, and just being more interactive and not decided on who goes first. Now, I will say that there is still merit in terms of complaints, in terms of, I think, still having a general lack of very effective champions and ways of dealing with Mercurial. Now, I will say that with the newest releases of champions, Plarium has been very clearly shoehorning into one particular way of countering Mercurial, and that is through champions with multi-hitter AoEs, right? I think Tecton is a stupidly, glaringly obvious champion that Plarium has designed in respect of Mercurial, and he has an A1 that attacks all enemies 2 times, right? Even the newest Void champion from the Sylvan Watchers, Rhea, has, a triple hit AoE, like Marius, right? And it's clear that they recognize ways of dealing with Mercurial is simply to have champions that have multi-hit AoEs. And personally, for me, I think this is an incredibly lazy and narrow, restricted way of dealing with Mercurial. For me, I think that there are a wide range of actual answers to Mercurial, such as ally attack. Queen of Hearts is a fantastic example of this, being able to bring in all allies to attack a single enemy, and because Total Guard gets neutralized by any amount of damage, it doesn't matter if it's just a random support getting in with the ally attack, it is still a very effective way of dealing with Total Guard. Now, unfortunately, ally attack champions in the arena are just not all that common. Maybe you can run Lady Mikage. I have seen her in some arena teams. And then there's one very fantastic and strong champion, Pauldrick, that also brings this. But really just a very small handful of champions with ally attack. Maybe you have champions like Necrit, for example, that does bring in an ally attack as well, but this isn't a full team ally attack. You also have, to a lesser extent, Marichka, right? The Banner Lord, Void Legendary Reviver with the A1 to bring in an ally, right? There are a decent handful of ally attacks, but really not that many. That are super arena viable. It's not like you can just throw in a random like Farrakhan the Fat Man into your arena squad, right? Now, outside of ally attacks, there are still things like counterattacks that are very effective at destroying Total Guard, because you are able to break it after the Total Guard stack responds and before the champion gets the next turn. So during that counterattack, the champion that you counterattack onto doesn't have any more Total Guard stacks. Carnage, I think, is one of the classic examples where he has this ability to counterattack on a champion. But really, there is very little counterattack in the meta, right? You're not going to see this counterattack buff out very frequently. There's not really champions that place it very well, except for maybe Hecaton, who is, again, one of the newer champions that is able to place this counterattack buff onto an ally. Also, again, very effective. Again, another champion in terms of ally attack, we have Palace, right? To a lesser extent, Garrel, as well as Mavar as one of the newer champions, right? And the last bit I think that has been actually very cool and techy that has been popping out is this reflect damage. One of the champions that actually have been popping out in terms of very niche sort of counters to Mercurial is Rogni. Because he does have the passive that reflects damage whenever allies are hit under a shield, and this reflects back damage, I think multiple times, even in an AoE like multi-hit. So I'm not sure about exactly how the interaction works, but I know it does destroy Total Guard stacks. We have Pelops, who places Magma Shield. Again, the idea of reflecting damage to destroy Total Guard stacks is there. And I think with more experimentation, there are probably more champions out there that can be much more effective against Total Guard than something like Stone Skin, right? And it's just a matter of exploration, new champ design that continue to push the envelope where the effectiveness of Total Guard can be countered by this group of things. The effectiveness of Stone Skin can be countered by this sort of things, but not other things. And then we come to an equilibrium where we exist with both Stone Skin, Mercurial, and whatever other sets we get in the future. I think the last bit of improvement that we can see apart from just champion design, and I would again love to see champions that aren't just funneled into this multi-hitter AoE kind of thing where we see more interesting ally attack champions, we see more interesting deflect damage champions. The last bit is deflection. This is a set that also can destroy Total Guard stacks at a 6-piece, but is locked behind this whole core hammer thing, which is so difficult to get. Deflection just as a set, so impossible to farm and obtain an even good set. Like if I look up this is all my deflection gear that I have on this account throughout my 4 years of playing the game. This is it, and I don't have a single set out there that I can equip on any champion to be a serviceable set at the level of play that I am. But this 6-piece bonus does help to counter Mercurial. And one of the directions that some of the champions like Commodus and Gizmek have seen are putting themselves into very fast 6-piece deflection sets. And this has also helped them to thrive a little bit more in the Mercurial meta from before, where they might have not really had a good way of dealing it. And to really summarize it, I think that Mercurial is quite manageable. I would love to see more ways outside of multi-hitter AoEs, but I think that there are options in the game. Some are less explored, some like deflection just are much harder to obtain a good set, but if there are better ways in the future of doing so, the power level of Mercurial can be addressed in that way. I really don't want to see a nerf to the overall how Mercurial works because of what it does. It has helped to enable so many champions out there. Someone like, I think, Sanguine Maria. I don't think she would be playable without 9-piece Mercurial. She would just get stunned, CC to death, and not be able to take a turn. I don't think our newest one of our newest fusions, Mavara, would be playable without 9-piece Mercurial. Because if you just put these champions in Stone Skin, guess what? They're just going to get bombed into the next century. Mercurial has done so much good in helping more champions find their way into the meta that I don't want it to be taken away because people are annoyed at how long it takes to deal with Mercurial. I think the arena is so much fun right now because Mercurial allows a more back and forth fight between you and your opponent. It allows for much more agency and a lot less RNG, and it's not flipped by whichever champion is built the fastest because they had better gear than you because they've spent another 30,000 energy in Dragon. And so that's, to me, the truth behind Mercurial, the good it's done, and why I am very surprised to hear people complain about it. I think from a casual standpoint, I understand fights take longer, but from people who are invested in Arena, from people like Ash and Drock, who are high-level accounts and play Arena a lot, I'm so surprised that they are not satisfied with the state of Mercurial. I think there can be good champions released in the future that deal with it better, that aren't restricted to just nukers. And I think there is more room for experimentation in how to better deal with Mercurial. But I don't think it needs any change. And I'd love to hear you guys' opinions based on what I said in this video. If you think it's true, if you agree with anything that I've said, I'd love to hear. And I'd love for you guys to spread the word and to see what sort of conversations come up in this discussion. But if you guys enjoyed this video, I'm gonna wrap it up from here. I'd love to continue any conversations in the comments below or whatever channels, Reddit, you guys have. I'm always there for you guys, and I appreciate you guys for tuning into this video. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoyed this kind of content, feel free to like and subscribe to the channel. That really helps me out. But I'll catch you guys in the next videos. I want to put out a video covering my live arena season climb for me ending in top 51. And another sneak peek for anyone who does watch this very last second. If you do, please comment below so I know who you guys are. But and it's my F2P account, I have finished Faction Wars Hard, and I have all stars to collect Polera. So I want to put out a video talking about Faction Wars Hard as well. But thank you guys so much for watching this video. I'm not back, but I want to start making a few videos of things I have in mind. Thank you guys again for tuning in, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace out, guys, and take care.